I never thought that one night could turn my whole world upside down, but that night did exactly that. It changed everything between me, Mila, and my older brother, Andre, in ways I never expected. It all started so normally, so familiarly. Our parents went away for the weekend to Kiev, something they rarely did, to visit Aunt Lena. For the first time in months, it was just the two of us in our small house outside Kharkiv. No rules, no curfew, no one telling us what to do. At first, it felt like freedom. We sprawled out on the old sofa in our pajamas, stuffed our mouths with crispy broth-flavored crackers that Mom always hid, and watched all the old Soviet comedies we could find on dusty tapes. We laughed at the same silly jokes, paused scenes to argue about who said what, and competed to see who could quote more lines from The Irony of Fate. It felt like the old days, when we were little, before life got complicated, before school, friends, and growing up started pulling us in different directions. I wore my favorite home clothes then, soft, faded denim shorts that barely felt like anything against my skin, and Andre's old university t-shirt, which was too big for me but fit cozily, especially when I curled up. My hair was in a messy bun, but a few strands had escaped and tickled my neck. On my feet were knitted socks with funny faces, a gift from Grandma, that always kept me warm on cool autumn evenings. As the night grew deeper, something changed. The air seemed heavier, quieter. The light from the old TV flickered across our faces, and suddenly the silence between us stopped feeling so comfortable. I noticed things I hadn't before, like how Andre kept glancing at me when he thought I wasn't looking, or how his smile didn't reach his eyes, staying somehow frozen. Maybe I was overthinking it, maybe not, but something was definitely different. Then, just as I was about to ask if he was okay, something happened. Something unexpected. And from that moment, nothing between us would ever be the same. We sat on the sofa with a big bowl of popcorn between us, laughing at some ridiculous comedy neither of us had planned to watch. It was one of those silly movies you put on just for background noise, but somehow it made us both laugh again, like little kids. For a while, it was good, just easy, just the two of us enjoying the moment, like in the old days. But when the movie ended and the laughter faded, something shifted in the air. The room became quieter, and a strange silence settled in. We didn't talk as much anymore, not because we had nothing to say, but because it felt like we were both waiting for something. I wasn't exactly sure what, but there was this feeling, this unspoken tension, as if we were standing on the edge of a conversation that had been trying to surface for a long time. Then out of nowhere, my brother Andre, who was usually so open and straightforward, looked at me seriously, thoughtfully, and said, "Mila, have you ever wondered what it's like, just to experiment a little?" For a split second, the world froze. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard him right. My heart leapt, then beat not with fear or anything bad, but with the weight of something deeper. He wasn't joking, and strangely, I immediately understood what he meant. It wasn't some wild or inappropriate suggestion. It was about curiosity, about growing up, about those thoughts people sometimes have but never say out loud. The silence stretched between us like a rope. I exhaled, steady and calm, and slowly nodded, "Yeah, I've thought about it too." And just like that, everything changed. Not dramatically or dangerously, but in a way that made us both realize how much we were growing, not just as brother and sister, but as individuals trying to understand the world and ourselves a little better. He slowly reached out, his fingers barely touching my hand, and in that moment when his skin touched mine, a sudden shiver ran through me, like an electric current awakening every nerve beneath my skin. I froze, caught off guard by the intensity of the sensation. I had never seen him look at me like that before. In his eyes, usually so familiar, there was now something different, something darker, deeper, and undeniably new. It was as if I was seeing him for the first time, glimpsing a side of him that had always been there, but hidden under layers I hadn't noticed until now. In his gaze was a strange mix of emotions, excitement, hesitation, and vulnerability, so raw that the air between us felt electrified, almost fragile. It wasn't just curiosity, it was something deeper, something that made the world around us disappear, leaving only this intense moment suspended in time. Without any warning, he leaned closer, his breath warming my cheek. My heart fluttered, my breath caught, and for a second, everything else vanished. Then his lips met mine, soft, gentle, and uncertain at first, as if he was carefully testing the waters, trying to read my reaction. The kiss was tender, filled with quiet affection that sent waves of warmth through me. But then, slowly, the tenderness grew deeper, more insistent. The kiss became a silent conversation, a language without words, saying so much. It was a promise, a question, a discovery, all at once, spoken through the meeting of lips and the gentle pressure of hands. In that moment, nothing else mattered. There was only us, locked in a quiet exchange that carried everything we hadn't said aloud. I won't lie, it was incredibly good, more than good, in fact. It felt like a silent storm, a surge of warmth and wonder that enveloped me from the very first touch. Each brush of his fingers was filled with a certain tender reverence, as if he were carefully unveiling something rare and fragile, something he had never dared to touch before. His hands moved with such gentleness and intent, tracing every curve and contour of me like a map, memorizing the subtle lines and tiny imperfections that made me unique. But it was not just physical, it was something deeper, almost sacred. As if, in that moment, he truly saw me beyond the surface, beyond the skin, peering into the very essence of who I was, into those parts one usually kept hidden. I felt it in the way his eyes softened when they met mine, in the slow, thoughtful breaths he took as he leaned closer, as though afraid to break the fragile spell between us. In his gaze, I found a kind of acceptance in how I hadn't realized I so desperately craved. I felt wanted, cherished, as if I were the most important person in the world, tender and completely under his care, a kind of devotion that feels like a promise, quiet, unspoken, yet unwavering. It was intoxicating, almost overwhelming, and I savored every second, every stolen heartbeat, as if I were tasting something precious and rare. Even as the moment wrapped around us, soft and slow, I knew I didn't want it to be just a fleeting, passing event. I wanted it to mean more, to linger, to live on long after the night faded into dawn. I wanted him to carry this memory with him, not as a simple recollection but as a secret treasure, hidden close to his heart, pulsing there with warmth and meaning, just as I did. So I attuned myself to his every movement, my body responding to his touch like a silent melody. Every glance he cast at me, slow and searching, I met with my own. Every breath he exhaled between us became a shared rhythm, drawing us closer in this delicate dance. When our lips met, I kissed him back slowly, deliberately, letting the moment stretch, savoring the electricity that sparked between us. My fingers tangled in his hair, tracing the shape of his head as if reading a story written in curls and waves, layer by layer, chapter by chapter, each detail a new discovery, a secret whispered in the quiet of our closeness. In this tender exchange, I felt promises forming, not just desires, but something deeper, something real, a bond that could hold us no matter what came next. In this quiet room, with nothing but the faint hum of the night and the gentle rhythm of our breathing around us, it felt as if we were dancing to a song only we could hear, two souls moving together in perfect harmony. It was a silent conversation, a secret language spoken not in words but in the touch of skin, the meeting of eyes, and the quiet exchange of something indescribably intimate. I gave him all I had, the softest touches, trembling with longing, the quietest whispers carrying secrets I had kept buried deep inside for far too long. Every feeling I had locked away, every fragment of myself I thought lost or forgotten, spilled out in raw, unfiltered waves. It was like shedding the layers of a fragile shell that had guarded my heart through years of silence and loneliness. Each layer fell away, revealing something vulnerable, tender, and true beneath. There were no more restraints between us, no walls left dividing our worlds. In that delicate space, suspended between breaths and heartbeats, we were no longer just brother and sister sharing a secret. We became something entirely different, something fierce, wild, impossibly alive, a connection so deep it felt as if it had always existed, quietly waiting to be discovered. The sensation was like a wildfire, smoldering in the dark, at first quiet, almost hesitant, but unstoppable. It crept through the undergrowth of our shared history, gaining strength and heat until it blazed into a flame that consumed everything in its path. This heat, a wild, relentless fire, burned between us, igniting a bond that could not be ignored or contained. Every touch was electric, every breath a spark, every glance a charged current that left me breathless, tangled in a storm of emotions I hadn't dared to name until now. The world outside seemed to vanish, narrowing until only the two of us remained, suspended in this tense, fragile space. Time slowed, and the silence between us was thick and full, speaking more eloquently than any words about all that it did not say. When it finally ended, the silence lingered, like the last ember of a dying fire, soft, but still warm, still alive. He lay beside me, his chest rising and falling unevenly, as if his body was still catching up to the whirlwind of feelings that had surged through him. His eyes, heavy with exhaustion and shadowed by something deeper, held a depth I had never seen before, a quiet intensity, a vulnerability that reached beyond the surface to something raw and unspoken. In that gaze, I saw 1,000 words left unsaid, truths too fragile to be spoken aloud, yet impossible to deny. And in that fragile, aching moment, I realized that nothing between us would ever be the same. Then a small, almost shy smile touched the corners of his lips, a smile that said everything words could never express. It was a smile filled with warmth and secrets, delicate but full of promises. And just like that, sleep pulled him down, like a gentle tide, wrapping him in its quiet, inevitable embrace. In that moment, I watched the slow, steady rise and fall of his chest, feeling a strange mix of peace and longing settle deep within me, knowing that what we shared would last long after the night gave way to dawn. But I did not sleep for a long time after he drifted off. My body was still restless, and my mind was a tangled web of thoughts I could not unravel. The silence of the night enveloped me, but inside, my heart beat wildly, trapped in the chaotic space between wonder and confusion, excitement and fear. My skin still tingled, alive with the ghost of every touch, every glance that had passed between us. Each one was a spark that refused to be forgotten, as if my entire being was electrified, charged with a secret energy that hummed beneath my ribs and whispered through my veins. My thoughts spun, endless questions flooding my mind. Was this right? Was it wrong? Was it some forbidden truth we were destined to discover, or just a fleeting spark, a mistake caught between the fragile cracks of growing up? I had no answers. The world outside went on, vast and indifferent, but inside my chest, a storm of feelings raged, too complex to name. All I knew was one thing: what we shared felt real. It felt necessary, as if time itself had pressed pause just for us, for that one fragile, electric night when everything else faded away and only the two of us remained, standing in a quiet universe we had created ourselves. After that night, we never spoke of it again, not a single word passed our lips. It slipped quietly into the space between us, an unspoken truth, hidden like a secret treasure, buried deep beneath the surface of our everyday lives. It lived in the pauses between our laughter, in the way our eyes sometimes met and lingered a moment longer than they should before quickly looking away. We continued as if nothing had changed, as if the rhythm of our lives went on, unbroken and untouched by that fleeting moment of rawness. But beneath the surface, I knew something had changed, something fragile, forever altered, quietly kept in the silence we both chose to maintain. But deep down, everything had changed, and no matter how we tried to ignore it, that night left a mark, quiet, powerful, and unforgettable. And yet that night remained only our silent secret, carefully etched into the fabric of our memories, never spoken aloud, but never fading away. It was a moment frozen in time, wrapped in silence, too delicate and precious to be disturbed by words. Like a hidden treasure locked deep inside, something only we could carry with us, wherever life might lead. Will it happen again? I cannot say. Life has a way of pulling people apart, sending us down different paths before we even realize it. Maybe we will grow up and move on, pretending that night was just a fleeting shadow, something we both agreed to forget. Or maybe it will remain locked away, an invisible thread that binds us together, no matter how far we wander. But one thing I know for sure, That night lives in me forever, alive and glowing like a secret flame. Some moments are too tender, too beautiful to ever share with anyone else. They belong only to us, quiet, sacred, and unforgettable. And sometimes, that is exactly how it should be. The next morning, sunlight flooded our living room, illuminating every corner, every speck of dust, every hint of what had happened between us during the night. I woke first, with a strange emptiness in my stomach, not hunger, but rather anticipation. Andre slept, curled up at the other end of the couch, one hand dangling to the floor, his soft snoring breaking the morning silence. In the daylight, he looked simply like my older brother, messy hair, a slightly wrinkled t-shirt, familiar and dear. But I knew everything had changed. Last night was imprinted on me like an invisible tattoo, and I felt it in every movement. I got up quietly, trying not to wake him. My denim shorts and t-shirt now felt somehow foreign, too ordinary after the sensations I had experienced. I walked into the kitchen, where a light mess remained from our movie marathon. I turned on the kettle to make myself a strong herbal tea. This ritual always helped me gather my thoughts. While the water boiled, I went to the window. Behind it stretched our small yard, the old apple tree, the garden beds that Mom always tried to keep tidy, even if only dill and parsley grew there. Beyond the house, at a distance, you could see the roofs of neighboring houses, nestled in greenery. We lived in a small village near Kharkiv, where everyone knew each other, and secrets like ours seemed utterly impossible. My thoughts raced. This was wrong, wasn't it? I knew it shouldn't be this way. But why did it feel so natural? So right. Last night felt like a dream I didn't want to let go of. I could still feel his touch, the warmth of his lips, his gaze that held so much he never said. And the most troubling thing was that I wanted more. The thought squeezed my heart. When the kettle let out a piercing whistle, Andre stirred on the couch, and I flinched. Setting the mug on the table, I tried to act as usual, as if nothing had happened. He finally opened his eyes, blinked sleepily, and sat up, stretching. Morning already. His voice was husky, thick with sleep. Yeah. Want some tea? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady and casual. He nodded, rubbing his eyes. I made him tea and set it in front of him. The same awkward silence hung between us as last night, only now it was heavier, saturated with things left unsaid. He drank his tea, avoiding my gaze. I didn't look at him directly either, just caught his glance from the corner of my eye now and then. His eyes held uncertainty, mixed with a hint of confusion. He didn't seem to know how to act either. Finally, he cleared his throat. Mila, about last night. My heart leapt. I waited for him to say it was a mistake, that we should forget it. And part of me wanted that, wanted to return to our old, familiar life. But another part, the one that awoke in me last night, clung desperately to the memory. About last night? I asked, trying to sound indifferent, though inside I was tense. He sighed and set his mug on the table. I don't know what that was. We shouldn't have. His words hit me like a cold shower. Of course, he was right. It was madness. I lowered my gaze to my hands, fiddling with the hem of my t-shirt. Yeah, maybe you're right, I mumbled. Silence settled between us again, but now it was filled with pain and a kind of regret. I felt the distance between us growing again, as if last night was just a fleeting illusion that melted away with the first rays of the sun. We spent the rest of the day in a strange emptiness, avoiding each other, speaking only when necessary and then in short, clipped phrases. By evening, I decided to go for a walk to clear my head. I put on my favorite light summer dress made of thin viscose with a small floral print. It was a gentle blue, with thin straps that nicely highlighted my collarbones, and a skirt that playfully fluttered in the wind just above my knees. I slipped on low sandals adorned with small silvery beads and took a small crossbody bag. I let my hair down, letting it fall freely over my shoulders. I probably looked simple and sweet, but inside me a storm was raging. I walked along the dusty country road, past fields planted with sunflowers that seemed to reach for the sky. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air was filled with the scent of freshly cut grass and flowers. I reached the old pond on the edge of the village. Andre and I used to fish here often as children. The water was calm, reflecting the sky. I sat on the old wooden bench, watching the ripples on the water. I felt so heavy. The feeling I experienced with Andre was so new, so powerful. It turned everything I thought I knew upside down. I'd always seen him as my protector, my best friend, my brother. But now everything was different. I couldn't stop thinking about his gaze, his hands, the way he kissed me. And the thought that it was wrong fought inside me with the desire to repeat it again. I sat by the pond until the sky grew dark and the stars began to appear one by one. Finally, I got up and headed home. The road seemed endless, each step heavy. When I reached our house, the windows glowed dimly. I went inside, and my heart tightened again. Andre was sitting in the living room, his back to me, staring into the darkness. "Andre?" I called softly. He flinched and turned. His face was pale, his eyes red, as if he hadn't slept all night. He looked so lost, so vulnerable. My heart wavered. "Mila," his voice was almost a whisper. "We need to talk." I walked over and sat across from him, at the other end of the couch. There was distance between us again, but now it was filled with unspoken words pressing down on us both. "I know," I replied, "it's hard for me too." He nodded, looking at me. In his eyes, I saw the same pain, the same confusion I felt in myself. And at that moment, I realized that no matter how much we tried to ignore it, what happened wasn't just a mistake. It was something more, something that touched us both too deeply. He slowly reached out his hand, and this time I didn't flinch. His fingers brushed my cheek, softly, almost weightlessly. The touch sent a gentle shiver through me, not from surprise, but from something like comfort. In his eyes, looking straight into mine now, was the tenderness I so desperately craved. "I don't know what to do, Mila," he whispered. "But I can't just forget. And I don't think you can either." I closed my eyes, letting his words sink into me. He was right. It was impossible to forget. That night had left too deep a mark. I felt tears welling in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. "No," I replied, opening my eyes. "I can't." We sat like that, in silence, his hand on my cheek, our gazes woven together in a silent question. The question wasn't about what had happened, but about what would come next. And we had no answer. But something inside me whispered that this was only the beginning. The next day, life seemed to return to its usual rhythm, but only on the surface. My parents were supposed to return from Kiev tomorrow evening, and we needed to create the perfect illusion that nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Andre and I moved around the house like two actors on a stage, avoiding eye contact, not touching each other, steering clear of any hint that the silence between us had become home to something new, something inexplicable. I busied myself with cleaning, tidying up the kitchen, rearranging books on the shelves in the living room. My hands performed familiar motions automatically, but my thoughts were far away. I kept recalling his touch on my cheek, his words. His husky voice echoed in my mind, repeating, "I just can't forget." "And I don't think you can either." That phrase became my personal mantra, proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Andre was busy too, mowing the grass in the yard, then fixing something in the garage. Occasionally, I heard the sound of tools, then silence would fall again. I knew he felt the same. This unspoken connection, like a thin but strong thread, now bound us tighter than ever. It felt like a delicate veil enveloping us, making the world around us a little hazy, and the two of us the center of a special universe. In the afternoon, I decided to visit our local shop at Galina's, in the village center. I needed to buy fresh bread and a few things for dinner. I put on a light ivory cotton dress, adorned with delicate embroidery on the sleeves, cinched with a thin braided belt to accentuate my waist. The dress was long, almost to my ankles, but the side slits revealed my slender legs with each step. On my feet were comfortable linen espadrilles, perfect for walking along dusty roads. I wove a thin silk ribbon matching the embroidery into my hair, peeking coquettishly from beneath the strands. I felt light and almost weightless, but inside there was still anxiety. On my way back from the shop, I walked past the old village club, where they usually held dances on weekends. Today it was quiet there, only the wind rustling the leaves of ancient poplars. Suddenly, I heard someone call my name. Mila. I turned around. It was Andre. He stood at our gate, leaning on a shovel, dressed in his work jeans and faded t-shirt. The sunlight illuminated his hair, making it look a shade lighter. His gaze, usually so open and familiar, now hid something. Something secret. "Where are you coming from?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just finished in the yard," he nodded toward the garage. "Did you go to the shop?" "Yeah. For bread." I showed him the bag holding a loaf, still warm and fragrant with fresh baking. He took a few steps toward me, closing the distance. My heart beat faster. His gaze slid over my dress, lingered on the embroidery, then rose to my eyes. I felt goosebumps on my skin. It was not just the look of a brother. There was something in it neither of us could say aloud, but it was obvious. "You know," he began, lowering his voice, "I've been thinking about what you said. About that night." I held my breath. The street was empty. Not a soul. Just the two of us, standing in the middle of the road, surrounded by the rustling of leaves and the scent of wild grasses. "And?" My voice was quieter than I expected. He came even closer, almost touching. He smelled of fresh grass and that masculine, woody scent I'd always liked. He leaned in slightly, and I felt the warmth of his breath on my face. I realized I can't just let it go, Mila. His voice was husky, filled with some deep, hidden emotion. It was real. And I can't pretend it didn't happen. He reached out, and his fingers touched my cheek, just as they had the night before. My eyes closed by themselves at his touch. It was soft, gentle, but with a force that said so much. He gently traced my cheekbone with his thumb, and I felt a wave of warmth spread through my body. That touch was a promise, a confirmation that we were not alone in this new, unexplored world of our feelings. "Do you feel it, Mila?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "It's something special." I nodded, unable to say a word. Words were unnecessary. Everything was in that touch, in that gaze, in the silence that now seemed filled with meaning. He leaned in even closer, and his lips barely brushed my forehead. It wasn't a kiss, but rather a weightless touch, a promise that left a gentle tingling behind. "We need to be careful," he whispered, pulling away. "Our parents will be back soon." But he didn't finish, but I understood. There was that unspoken but, which meant that despite all obstacles, we were connected. He looked at me with such tenderness, such vulnerability, that it took my breath away. In that moment, I felt that he saw me not just as a sister, but as a woman, as something more. It was an intoxicating feeling. "I know," I replied quietly, opening my eyes. My fingers instinctively reached for his hand, and I squeezed his palm, feeling the warmth of his skin. "We will." We stood like that for a few more seconds, holding hands in the middle of the road, under the sun that was slowly beginning to set beyond the horizon. It felt like a secret ritual, a vow we made to each other without a single word. Our palms were damp with excitement, but I didn't want to break the contact. That touch meant we were together, that we were in this together. Finally, he gently released my hand and took a step back. "Go, bring in the bread," he said, trying to make his voice sound casual. "Otherwise, Mom will be upset if there's no dinner." I nodded, knowing he was right. We needed to return to our normal lives. But now, that normalcy was laced with secret signs, unspoken promises, and every touch that lingered on my skin. I walked toward the house, feeling his gaze follow me. Every step now seemed filled with new meaning. In the evening, as we ate the dinner I had prepared, we tried to act as usual, talking about little things, about the neighbors, about the upcoming school year. But under the table, when Andre's leg brushed lightly against mine, I felt an electric current rush through my body. I nearly dropped my fork. It was such a small, subtle gesture, but it told me more than any words could. It showed me that he hadn't forgotten, that he felt it too. And that realization filled me with both excitement and anticipation. The future was unknown, but it seemed so thrilling. The next few days passed in a strange state of expectation. Our parents returned, bringing souvenirs from Kiev and asking their usual questions about how we had been. Andre and I were perfect. We laughed at our parents' jokes, told stories about our chores around the house, creating the illusion of ideal children. But every time our eyes met, or when we accidentally brushed against each other in passing, an invisible spark ran through me. It reminded me of the secret that now existed between us. I began to notice details I had never paid attention to before. How Andre chose his clothes, he often wore long-sleeved shirts now, even when it was warm, as if hiding something, or, on the contrary, light t-shirts that showed off his muscular arms. I noticed his walk, his gestures. It seemed as if every step, every movement was filled with some hidden meaning that only I could understand. He, too, became more attentive to me. He would bring me my favorite yogurt when I forgot about it, or ask if I was cold when the evening breeze grew a little chillier. These little things became our new language, secret signs only the two of us understood. One evening, when our parents went to visit the neighbors, Andre suggested we watch a movie. I agreed, though I knew it would be a test. I put on my favorite home outfit, soft, loose-fitting silk pants and a matching camisole with thin straps. The silk glided pleasantly over my skin, creating a feeling of lightness and freedom. On my feet were the fluffy slippers I adored. My hair was gathered up in a high, messy ponytail, exposing my neck. We settled on the couch. There was a small but noticeable distance between us. The movie was some old melodrama we had never seen before. As the plot developed, the tension in the room grew. Not because of the film, but because of what was happening between us. I could feel his gaze on me, even without looking up. My skin tingled in anticipation. In one scene, the characters embraced, and Andre suddenly moved closer. His hand, whether by accident or not, touched my leg, which was stretched out along the couch. The gentle brush of my silk pants against his jeans sent a wave of goosebumps through my body. I held my breath. He didn't pull his hand away. His fingers softly glided over the fabric, then a little lower, to my ankle. It was such a tender, almost imperceptible touch, but for me, it was louder than any shout. I felt my face flush. He gently squeezed my ankle, then slowly, almost weightlessly, stroked upward along my calf, through the thin silk of my pants. My heart pounded wildly. It was such an intimate gesture, so forbidden, and yet incredibly pleasant. I didn't pull away. My body responded on its own, feeling his every move. I realized my breathing had become uneven. He looked up, and our eyes met. In his gaze, there was fire, mixed with caution, a question, and a kind of wild longing. My cheeks were burning. I couldn't look away. In that moment, the world narrowed to just the two of us, to that couch, to that quiet living room. His hand slowly continued its path upward, along the inside of my leg, past my knee, still through the silk. Every millimeter his fingers moved was both torture and delight. I knew he was taking a risk, and I knew I was too. But I couldn't stop him, nor did I want to. At that moment, everything felt right. My pulse thundered in my temples, and my body tensed in anticipation. I felt his fingers moving higher and higher, and every time they approached the edge, my breath caught. Finally, his fingers reached the waistband of my silk pants, where they hugged my skin. He held his breath. So did I. It was a moment of truth. The boundary was so close, so enticing. My senses were at their limit. I felt his fingers through the thinnest fabric, sensed the warmth of his palm, his hesitant yet persistent desire. He pressed lightly, and I felt my body trembling beneath him. At that moment, the gate creaked. We both flinched, as if struck by electricity. Andre's hand instantly withdrew. He sat up straight, pretending nothing had happened. I also tried to appear as calm as possible, though my heart was pounding madly. A few seconds later, my parents' voices echoed in the hallway. They had returned. The moment was shattered, but its echo continued to vibrate in the air. I glanced at Andre. His face was pale, but the same fire still burned in his eyes as it had a second ago. He looked at me with an unspoken apology and a promise. The rest of the evening passed in tense normality. Andre and I barely spoke, exchanging only rare, meaningful glances that held disappointment, understanding, and the unspoken later. When my parents finally went to bed, I lay in my own for a long time, feeling my body still burning from his touch. I closed my eyes and relived every second of what had happened on the couch. His slow, almost torturous caresses, his gaze full of fire. I knew we were playing with fire. It was dangerous, wrong, but I couldn't stop. This new connection, this subtle, forbidden line we were balancing on, was too alluring. I wanted more. I wanted to know what would happen if we crossed that line. And I knew he wanted it too. After that night with the movie, when our parents nearly caught us, the atmosphere in the house became even more electrified. Every glance, every accidental touch was laden with hidden meaning. My parents, of course, noticed nothing, absorbed in their usual routines, trips to the dacha near Brovary, preparations for winter. But we, Mila and Andre, lived in our secret world, where even the most innocent gesture could mean so much. I started wearing my favorite pencil skirt made of soft denim more often, which fit my figure perfectly, accentuating my hips while still being casual enough. I paired it with light, semi-transparent blouses that hinted at what lay beneath, but revealed nothing extra. For example, one blouse was a delicate pink color, with small buttons all the way up, but I always left a few at the top undone, letting my collarbones show a little. On my feet I usually wore comfortable sneakers, but sometimes I put on low-heeled shoes that made a pleasant tapping sound as I walked. I noticed Andre started looking at my legs more often when I wore that skirt, and it thrilled me. It was a kind of game, our own, invisible to others. One evening, when our parents left for a family gathering in another city, leaving us alone again, I felt this night would be different. The air in the house was heavy with anticipation. I made dinner, trying to distract myself from my thoughts. Andre sat at the table, poking at his food with a fork, his gaze fixed on me. "Mila," he said quietly when I set his plate before him. His voice was hoarse. "We need to talk." My heart leapt. I sat down opposite him. The silence between us was thick. "About what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He looked up at me. There was such depth in his eyes, such longing, that it almost hurt. "About everything. About us. About what's happening." He stood up, walked to the window, where dusk was already settling outside. I can't pretend anymore, Mila. It's driving me crazy. I can't think about anything but you. About what happened that night. And what could have happened. I stood and walked over to him. My hands were trembling. Me too, Andre. I can't either. He turned to me abruptly, his eyes full of desperation and desire. But what are we supposed to do? It's wrong. And I can't stop. He reached out and took my hand. His fingers intertwined with mine, and a wave of warmth ran through my body. I think I've always felt this way about you, Mila. I just didn't realize it. Or didn't want to realize it. I squeezed his hand tightly. Me too. Me too. He stepped forward, pulling me close. My arms wrapped around his waist, and I felt the warmth of his body through the fabric of his t-shirt. He leaned in, and his lips found mine. It wasn't a gentle, uncertain kiss like the first time. It was a kiss full of passion, desperation, and long-suppressed emotions. His lips were demanding, yet incredibly tender. I responded with equal intensity, giving him everything that had built up inside me over these days. His hands slid down my back, pulling me even closer. I felt every contour of his body, his strong muscles, his breath growing uneven. My fingers tangled in his hair, gently tugging, deepening the kiss. I felt his slight stubble, smelling fresh. In that moment, everything else ceased to exist. There was only him, me, and this kiss, which spoke of thousands of unspoken words. He pulled away from my lips, breathing heavily. His forehead pressed against mine, and I could feel his heart racing. Mila, he whispered, his voice breaking. I don't know where this will lead us. But I can't live without it. I looked into his eyes, full of doubt and determination. Me too, Andre. Me too. We stood there, embracing, in the middle of our living room, which had seen us as children, and now as adults, standing on the threshold of something new and forbidden. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. We both froze. It was a loud, insistent ring that shattered our fragile idyll. Andre abruptly pulled away from me. His face turned pale. Who could that be? We exchanged frightened glances. Our parents weren't supposed to be back until tomorrow. Someone was knocking on the door, relentlessly. The tension in the room became unbearable. He quickly headed for the door, while I stood still, trying to catch my breath and compose myself. My heart was still pounding. When Andre opened the door, I heard a loud, unfamiliar voice. Andre. Mila. This is the police.